Hello, everyone. Welcome to these Mental Health Minutes, an extension of Keeley Life, where we explore the H in HEAL regarding mental wellness. We've had some requests come through from our fellow Keelians on how to navigate mental health for children and adolescents. So today we are going to explore this topic. I'm here with Gina Berkmeyer, that you all know, licensed professional counselor, as well as Christy Brandenstein to speak on mental health in children and adolescents. I'm going to allow Gina to facilitate the conversation. So welcome.
Thanks, April.
Thank you.
Christy, thanks for coming with us today on this ride. I really appreciate it. I'm going to let everybody know a little bit about you first. So Christy is a friend and colleague. She is actually the executive director of Crossroads Counseling Centers in St. Louis. And you and I have some similar roots in how we started down this path. Originally, Christy worked with people who were living below the poverty line, families and individuals, and kind of working to help provide solutions for those basic things, right? Like food, utility assistance, housing, all of that, right? And you started to kind of see, like me, you started to see these patterns unfolding, that was like a Band-Aid on a wound that needed surgery. Right. So we have these things that were evolving that you saw coming out, like traumas and helplessness and really some generational things, right? And then you went on and you did a master's with a focus in family dynamics and child-centered play therapy.
Right. It was a master's in counseling, but that's kind of where I focused my training.
Okay. And you've been doing this for 22 years.
It's true. Sounds like a really long time now, doesn't it?
And you know, you don't look like you've been able to do this for 22 years, but 22 years. And we've talked about this a lot, that even though that was, of course, an invaluable investment in that master's program, a lot of your lessons have come from being a mom of three, right? 17, 15, and 11. Did I get that right? Okay.
Yeah. All girls. Yep.
All girls.
Love those girls.
Yeah, you guys have that in common. That's right. So did I leave anything out that's important for our friends to know here today?
Yeah, my husband and I also had a child in our home for 4 years between the ages of 14 and 18 who had been through severe trauma, and we took temporary custody of her. So I feel like I've had these two really different parenting experiences in my life. And I never really know how to write that in a bio, but just like from all of my clients, from my children, from my marriage, so much of what I have learned has been through all of those experiences.
That makes a lot of sense. So today we're going to talk about some things for the kiddos, for the children and for the adolescents. And I just thought you would be the absolute best person to help us with this. And so I would love to just make this a conversation. April, jump in with questions too, especially as you have some little ones and you'll be thinking about some things that maybe me with all my groans, maybe I won't be thinking about. But so let's start with kind of how depression and anxiety can show up differently in children and adolescents as opposed to how it might show up in adults.
Sure. So most of us know some of the classic signs in adults, right? Sleeping more or less than usual, eating more or less than usual, irritability, withdrawal, in more severe cases, giving away things that are important to us, talking about wanting escape, things like that. And so you might see similar things, but what you might see in kids in particular are more physical complaints, headaches and stomach aches, right? Those things that they're talking about a lot, but you take them to the doctor and we can't really chase down any reason for that, right? That can be an indicator of anxiety or depression. More just wanting to stay home and being really clingy, right? With adolescents, a time when we would expect kids to be kind of moving out toward their peers and showing more social hunger, just lack of interest in things that they have typically enjoyed and are wanting to withdraw, being in their room, not wanting to connect even through social media with friends, right? One thing in children that we often misinterpret is a lot of anger and frequent tantrums that are kind of outside of age appropriateness can be a sign of anxiety and potentially depression. with some of your teenagers, if you notice what they're really gravitating towards is kind of songs with some nihilistic lyrics, TV shows that are really dark and focused around dark themes and death, that you just want to be a little curious about that.
I'm glad you used that word because I think it's such an important word, because sometimes parents can hear these kinds of things and immediately, like, the heart is racing, they're panicking. Oh my gosh, my kid likes this, or oh my gosh, my kid likes that, or my kid is really into this, or why does my kid wear black all the time? And really any of these things in isolation or in small parts or inconsistently or in tandem with some really healthy behaviors are really not a big deal, right?
Exactly
So
right.
that curiosity, say more about that, because I think that's really important, rather than us, pouncing on our kids and trying to pull away everything that they might be leaning into. How does the curiosity help us?
So you're absolutely right. One thing I want to highlight is that for those of us who are clinical practitioners, you have to have a significant number of these symptoms happening at one time for there to be a clinical diagnosis of anxiety or depression. And it is common for adolescents to be experimenting with different identities during this phase of the teenage years. Identity formation is an important part of that. So, we don't need to panic, but we do need to pay attention, right? And so curiosity is, oh, tell me about that song you like. What about that really speaks to you? Oh, let me tell you about this song that I really liked that was similar when I was a kid, right? You're being curious, and you're also sharing something about you. You're making it reciprocal and not just one way, right? If you want to know more, if your child is experiencing a lot of physical symptoms and you're wondering, what is this about? Ask some questions like, oh, what was recess like today? Who'd you play with? What do you guys like to play? Um, what was lunch today? Who'd you sit with? Did they like their food? Right? If you ask direct questions like, have you been feeling sad? Ah, right? They're more likely to dodge, right?
Right.
In fact, with adolescents in particular, kind of beginning to shut you out a little bit and push away emotionally is actually developmentally appropriate, right? They're not.
I think let's repeat that.
Sure.
Let's say that one more time.
Beginning to push away from you emotionally is really developmentally appropriate during adolescence. It doesn't mean they're going to stay there, right? But they're really beginning to figure out like who they are apart from you. That's necessary in this bridge to adulthood, right?
That's really helpful.
So think about ways to kind of come alongside. I always tell parents it's more like an arm around your shoulder rather than like a
Pulling.
right. Yes. Um, so another thing that is sometimes helpful in being curious, again, that word is so important. Tell me more about that. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Maybe you're reading a book together with your young child, and there's a character in there who is experiencing some anxiety. Do you ever feel that way? I feel that way sometimes. That might work with your adolescent when you're watching a show together.
Or when you read all the Harry Potter books with them, whether you want to or not.
Absolutely. Oh, so many good, dark, brooding characters.
Right?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So many, so many. So, okay. And then I think what might be helpful for parents too is to talk a little bit about one of the things that can begin to feel concerning is if there's this uptick in what feels like misbehavior or acting out or things like that, really whether child or adolescent. Can we talk about what that may or may not be an indication of?
Absolutely. So you know your child, right? And I think it's important for us to recognize that normal is not like a point on a line somewhere, right? Normal is relative to your child. You know their temperament. My children's temperament was evident in the womb, right? And so it's helpful to really look at your child and know what is normal for them. And so normal is kind of a range, right?
Mhm.
And And when things are getting outside that range is when we get a little bit concerned. So first, know your child. Second, be familiar with what's appropriate to their developmental stage. And a quick Google search about appropriate development for a 6-year-old will give you a good quick cheat sheet and help you know what is normal on both the positive and what we sometimes call the negative, but I might call the more challenging side of things, right? So there's a statistic I remember from my master's. It might be a little outdated now since we've already given you that 22-year. But I remember when I was working with inner city families, the statistic was children obey the first time only 60% of the time.
Only 60, 60. Yes.
60, right. So 40% of the time, you're probably going to have to give your child an instruction more than once. And with my personal experience, I would say probably 3 times, right? But if you have a pretty compliant child who you notice is all of a sudden really starting to push the limits, and it's not, they're not in their teenage years yet. They're really starting to be resistant, angry, and their temperament has been pretty easygoing. You notice this not only at home, maybe you're also noticing in other areas. You're seeing some changes in performance or grades or just the desire they have to do certain activities. That it's different. You want to notice it, be curious, perhaps even go to your family physician and see what their thoughts are about that. Now let's talk about adolescents because it's a lot trickier with teenagers, right?
It's supposed to look a little bipolar. Yeah.
It is supposed to look bipolar. And I'm, we went through a phase where we were diagnosing a lot of kids with bipolar. And I was like, okay, hold on, psychologist. Can we talk about the fact that normal adolescence is a very bipolar experience? Okay. Highs and lows. And as I said, they're really supposed to be kind of pushing away. So some normal things that you might see are they do spend more time in their room alone. Your job is to keep calling them back, right? It's when they're not responsive to your invitations to call them back. And they're going to push a little bit. But if you absolutely can't get them out of their room, then we have a little bit more of a problem, right?
Or perhaps even to invite you in, like, hey, can I come hang out with you in your space?
Great. Absolutely. You come in, you sit on the bed, you hang out with them, right? They're not completely, it's not a brick wall, right? It's just a gate, right? That they are now learning to open and close. So you may see your child experimenting at this age with different types of clothes and music. That's perfectly fine. But if you see them completely like disregarding their entire friend group and either isolating or turning to a little more dangerous or risky friend group, I'd be paying attention to some of that, right? It's normal for them to feel things really deeply, right? They're going to feel dramatically, right? It is not typical for them to turn to self-harm to manage those feelings, right? When you're seeing some of those more dangerous, risky, without regard for consequence kind of behaviors, that's when we're getting into what is more problematic, right? You're going to notice them paying a lot of attention to their clothing, to how they look, standing in front of the mirror. Mom, can you iron this again? I got a wrinkle in it before I wear it to school, right? That's normal. If you think they are restricting eating, if you think that they are really criticizing their body a lot, that's when you want to be more curious and start paying attention and begin asking some kind of nuanced questions.
That's really
you can add there.
No, I think that was a really thorough list. I think, again, I know we're hammering this point, but I think to go back to that thing about curiosity being so important, not panicking, recognizing that sometimes even these more concerning behaviors might be a little bit of that trying on different personalities. It might be a little bit more of that trying to see, does this fit me? Does this not fit me? And if there's an ability to kind of recognize that right at the ground level, maybe there's not so much, we don't really necessarily need to panic about that as much as just be curious. I think that word is, I just can't stress how important that word is. So I appreciate you bringing that word up. Yeah, that's really good. What about right now, as we're facing so many things that are really different? Like our kids might be, what we don't recognize is that part of this angst that we might be feeling from our kids right now in the day of COVID could actually be more grieving than anything else, and some anxiety around the uncertainty of that. So what can we do to help our kiddos and our adolescents with that?
Yeah, great question. I do think there's so much loss that's happening during this time for our kids, right? And we tend to not give it a lot of meaning because it's not what I would call loss with a capital L, but it's a lot of lowercase l losses, right? Oh, I didn't know that I wasn't going to go back to school after spring break. I didn't get to tell that friend goodbye who's moving away, right? My daughter is a senior next year, my oldest. And so there's lots of questions about, wow, what is my senior year going to even look like, right? Prolonged uncertainty, right? Um, Trips that we were looking forward to have been canceled this summer, right? Um, Even just the loss of seeing friends every day at school is really significant for our adolescents in particular, right? That developing sense of social connection and belonging, um, that ability to buffer like the focused learning of the classroom with the interaction and fun of the hallways, right? That was all out the window. For our younger kids, it is the loss of structure, right? Um, for certain kids, like kids who are maybe younger than first grade, their sense of time is not well developed. But if they're in school, that kind of helps them mark time and track. And all of that was kind of taken away. School is so regulating for kids. They know exactly what's coming next. They know who they sit beside. They know what's expected of them. And so suddenly, all of that was kind of pulled away. We as adults experience that, right? How many adaptations have you had to go through, right? Your kids are doing the same thing, but they may not have the words to describe exactly what's bothering them.
So how do we help them? How do we help sort of, I'm not a fan of the word, but I don't know a different one right now to use. How do we help normalize
Yeah, right.
what they're experiencing, and then maybe even buffer it a little bit for them?
Yeah, it's great. So I think we normalize it by just naming it. It's really helpful for kids when we can put language to something that they're feeling and kind of make sense. And it's like ordering it for them, right? They're kind of feeling all these chaotic feelings and they can't really figure out where it's coming from. And if we can help name it, that's kind of a container for it, right? And really like with our kids who still want us to, just be close, hold them, put an arm around them. Again, you're just helping be a container, right? You've heard this probably over and over during COVID-19. Create some kind of structure. Create things they can look forward to. Maybe it is every Friday night we're going to do pizza and movie night. On Saturday nights we pop popcorn and play games. You just create some new rhythms that kind of provide what the rhythms of school and sports practices were providing for them. Okay.
That's really helpful. That's really good. Anything else important to add there?
Our kids need some things that continue to build their sense of competency, right? So many of our kids are involved in sports and things that are continually pushing them, or robotics where they're, keep going to the next level. We need to provide some of those things at home. Maybe it is a chore chart with a point system. Maybe it is we're building a Lego creation and we keep challenging ourselves, right? for our teens, my daughter is ready to get her learner's permit. Well, that's what we used to call it. I don't know what you call it anymore.
I think it's still called that. I'm not totally sure, but I think it's a permit. Yeah.
And so keeping us on track with that, like setting a goal date and making sure we study and are keeping those goals in mind is really important, even though like until last week, I don't even know when the office would be open, right?
Yeah.
But we're trying to keep setting expectations and goals that help their development to continue.
And what I'm hearing also is getting creative and maybe making them a part of figuring this out appropriately in terms of age, but what do they enjoy? What are their aspirations? What are the extras that they've been trying to learn at school or in a class or on a team? And how do we then like incorporate that at home? Like, can we pull up a video of how to paint something and get the canvas and the paints out and paint it? Can we pull out how to build something and get the tools and the materials and build it? Or I have a friend who just, she's been posting videos. Her daughter is creating recipes because she loves to cook. And she was in all these classes, even outside of school, where she was learning to be a junior gourmet. And so she's doing all of these fun little videos on how to make recipes. So I think anything like that, right, that is in line with how that child has been created and who it is they're developing into.
That's right. Projects are great because we have a long time. Well, we've had a long time to execute them. And those are great skills. How to step by step work on a big project that your kid is excited and passionate about. That's great development for their executive functioning, right? Yeah. If we have time, I'll give you a little tip about how to kind of talk about worries during this time. If
Yeah.
that's helpful.
I think that would be helpful. I want to make sure we cover one thing, and then if we have time, let's come back to that. So there's a lot of information that we've been talking about, and I hope we've been driving home the point that this is not about perfection. But just in case we haven't driven it home well, let's talk about the importance of not being a perfect parent, but rather being a good enough parent. Can we talk about that? Literally, that actual, yes, that actual name, good enough parent.
This is my favorite, hands down concept in the whole field of psychotherapy. And it became my favorite the moment I became a mother. So the concept of the good enough parent is that our children actually need us to be a little less perfect in order for them to learn how to meet their own needs. Being a good enough parent leads to my second favorite phrase, which is healthy narcissistic wounding. Okay.
Mm.
Now, what that means is that our children slowly over time begin to realize they aren't the center of the world. Their needs don't have to be responded to the moment that they have them. And it gives them the chance to learn how to soothe themselves and to meet their own needs and develop that sense of competency that doesn't rest in our perfection, right? Now,
Yes.
let me emphasize that it's important in this concept is in the context of early on in infancy, we do respond to their needs right away. We do provide that secure base where we respond to their cries and we feed them. You know, there is a season where they are understandably 100% dependent on us, right? But we are not meant to perfectly anticipate and respond to them all the time. So you actually reflecting as a parent things like, oh man, I missed that. That's a bummer. Well, that's a really healthy thing for them to hear, right? Because our talk often becomes their internal dialogue and their self-talk, right? So instead of I can't believe I didn't know you were feeling that way. Oh man, I missed that. Bummer. Tell me more, right? We're giving language that they can internalize about when they mess up, when they're not perfect, rather than setting an expectation that we should all have it together all the time. Now you see how we're weaving back to anxiety and depression and beginning to give them some resilience against that.
And I think even shame, I hear that also as a great barrier or shield against shame. Yeah. So yeah, that's really great. Okay. So I think, do we want to try and loop back real quick and get a little bit of that language? Because I do think it is important.
Sure.
So if you can share in just soundbite for us, that would be awesome.
Yeah, well, there's just a technique called the worry web that can be helpful during times like COVID-19 or when we have a thing that we know we're all experiencing at one time. And you can sit at the dinner table, pass around a ball of yarn, and say, um, take the ball of yarn, 5 strands. How long the strand is how big this worry is for you. And you use that just to describe during this time of COVID-19, what are you worried about? I'm worried this much about our dog getting COVID-19. I'm worried this much about not getting to see my friends, right? That's an example. And everybody in the family does it.
That's great. I love that. It's so practical and just plus the visual. I think that could be really helpful for a lot of us.
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful. Well, Christy, thank you so much. I know in addition to this, you have some resources that you're going to share with April and I that we can then put out to Keelians to help them. I think you have some articles and some other things that you're going to be able to share.
That's right.
Correct?
Article, podcast, a book you can listen to. We're all pretty busy right now, so we'll keep it short.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. This has been so great. Thank you.
So-
April, do you have any other questions for Christy?
Oh, I have so many. I see us doing a whole nother one of these. But no, I think all of those were helpful, especially the one about not being perfect. That was nice to hear. I actually share that with my kids. Like, hey, I'm not perfect either, right? I make mistakes. It's important that they see us, see parents as human beings too, and not this perfect being. So no, I appreciate it and definitely will take a lot away from today. So well, thank you so much. This was our mental health minutes. Our next one will be on building character while you sleep. I did say that, building character while you sleep. Who doesn't want to do something while they're sleeping, right? That's going to help them long term. So until next time, stay healthy, Keelians. Bye-bye.